At least 14 people killed in a Russian strike on an apartment building in the northern Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. European foreign affairs ministers consider extending sanctions against Iranian drones.
Interest in the elections of the European Parliament is gradually rising, according to the latest edition of the Eurobarometer. Police dispersed a large protest in Tbilisi against a controversial foreign influence bill proposed by the ruling Georgian Dream Party.
At least 14 people have been killed after a Russian strike hit an apartment building in the northern Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the death toll may rise. The strike comes at a crucial moment for Ukraine, who is suffering from a lack of ammunition and artillery. Zelensky said that Ukraine needed to receive a sufficient number of air defense systems and that the world had insufficient determination to counter Russian aggression. Washington is currently holding approval for a $60 billion aid package for Ukraine. Ukraine's need for aid is now acute, according to experts. Chernihiv is some 150 kilometers north of Ukraine's capital Kyiv and has a population of 250,000 people. The European Union is considering extending sanctions against Iranian drones and missiles after Tehran launched a massive attack on Israel this weekend. The announcement followed an emergency meeting of EU foreign affairs ministers over the tense situation in the Middle East.
The region doesn't need a whole war embracing the whole region, and the world neither. And the people in Gaza neither, because if there is a regional escalation and the whole region is in war, then the war in Gaza will not stop. And the suffering of the people in Gaza will increase.
The EU already has restrictive measures against Iranian drones. The proposal is to extend these measures to Iranian missiles and ban regional allies from delivering Iranian drone attacks. However, more sanctions might not change anything.
Additional sanctions against Iran will likely have limited impact because since the Trump administration broke the Iran nuclear deal, the country has basically become a pariah. Then since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it tilted totally in the Russian camp. So it is already so isolated from the West that there is little more that the West can do in terms of sanctions vis-à-vis Iran.
EU member states are split on declaring the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. EU foreign ministers will meet again on Monday to further discuss the extended sanctions.
Relations between Rome and Brussels have never been so crucial in determining the future of Italy's economy. The upcoming European elections are key as Italy prepares to negotiate with the EU the terms of its fiscal adjustment path. According to Italy's Statistics Office, the country has emerged as one of the strongest performers among large European countries over the past 4 years, although the positive turn of events has not ended the country's long economic stagnation.
In un orizzonte temporale di medio-lungo periodo, quindi andiamo indietro agli anni 90 e confrontiamo la dinamica sia della crescita del fatturato delle imprese, della crescita del prodotto interno lordo, della produttività, ci accorgiamo che il nostro paese è cresciuto ad un tasso inferiore alla media europea. Quello che osserviamo recentemente è una reazione particolarmente positiva dopo la pandemia, quindi una capacità, delle imprese di aggiustarsi a questo shock, però anche questo effetto sembra mano a mano smussarsi.
The Italian government has forecasted the country's expected growth to be around 1% in 2024, a much more optimistic prediction compared to that of the European Union. Adding to that, both the pandemic and the latest geopolitical events have affected industrial output. Companies operating in various sectors, including energy, like this one we visited, have faced a number of challenges.
Prima la crisi pandemica, che ha comportato la riduzione del 20% del nostro fatturato, attraverso la quale siamo riusciti ad uscirne in maniera abbastanza forte. Poi nel 2022 arriva un altro colpo legato alla guerra russa-ucraina che ha cambiato totalmente i paradigmi del nostro settore e dei nostri processi di commercializzazione dei prodotti petroliferi. Questo però non ha fatto altro che velocizzare quei processi di cambiamento che ad oggi ci permettono di affrontare le sfide del mercato globale.
Business owners will meet election candidates ahead of the elections to discuss a document released by Italy's leading industrial association Confindustria on how to improve competitiveness in Europe. Meloni's government is counting on consumer spending and stimulus from the EU's recovery fund to boost growth and promised a much more cautious approach to state spending to comply with the latest reform of the bloc's fiscal rules. It will probably take until at least 2026 to get its budget deficit below the EU's 3% limit. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
Police used tear gas and physical force to disperse a large protest in Tbilisi outside the parliament building against a controversial foreign influence bill proposed by the ruling Georgian Dream Party. Several protesters were detained. Opponents of the proposal argue that it could derail Georgia's ambitions to become a member of the EU and referred to it as the Russian law.
არა რუსულ კანონს ისევ და ისევ ძალიან სამწუხაროა რომ იმის ნაცვლად რომ ახალგაზრდები ქმნიდნენ თავის მომავალს სწავლობდნენ მუშაობდნენ ერთობოდნენ ყოველ წელს ვიწევს ძალიან ბევრჯერ აქ დგომა და ძალიან დიდი დროის დაკარგვა აქ დგომაში მაგრამ არასდროს არ ყოფილა ეს დრო დაკარგული იმიტომ რომ შედეგი ყოველთვის აისახებოდა საქართველოზე დღემდე მოვედით სწორედ ამ სულისკვეთებით ისტორიის მანძილზე საქართველო ყოველთვის იყო ძალიან ნათელი ევროპული ოჯახის წევრი.
The parliament debated the bill but put off voting on its first reading until Wednesday. The bill closely mirrors a proposal that the ruling party withdrew last year following major street protests.
მიზანი არის გამჭვირვალობისა თავისუფლის რომ რაც შეიძლება შემცირდეს და ჩამოთვლილ. ძირითად საპრევენციოს პოლარიზაცია, რადიკალიზაცია, აგრესია, რელიგიური ექსტრემიზმი, სახელმწიფო ინსტიტუტების დასუსტება, არატრადიციული ცხოვრების წესის თუ პარტიების რადიკალურ რევოლუციური მიზნების დაფინანსება. ეს ყველაფერი არის დასაპრევენცირებელი.
Georgia's president issued an address to the European leaders asking them to discuss the developments at the upcoming European Council session.
Croatia is voting in an early parliamentary election after a campaign centered on a bitter rivalry between the president and prime minister. The ballot pits the ruling conservative Croatian Democratic Union, led by Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, against an alliance of centrist and left-wing parties, informally led by populist President Zoran Milanovic and his Social Democratic Party. Both the future of domestic policies and the EU unity are at stake.
The United Arab Emirates has been lashed by heavy rain in what's been called a historic weather event. The amount of rain recorded surpasses anything documented since data collection started in 1949. Homes across the country were flooded and flights disrupted at Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest. Rain is unusual in the UAE but does occur periodically during the cooler winter months, but many roads in other areas lack drainage given the lack of regular rainfall.
Interest in the elections of the European Parliament is gradually rising, according to the latest edition of the Eurobarometer. This survey shows that 60% of EU citizens are either very interested or somewhat interested in the June elections. By contrast, 40% are not very interested or not at all interested. 71% of participants also say they are likely to cast a vote to elect their representatives in Brussels, a 10-point increase since 2019. The unpredictable state of global affairs appears to weigh heavily. 81% of citizens say the current international context makes voting even more important. Also on voters' mind is the cost of living crisis, the fight against poverty, public health, and the creation of new jobs are the top 3 priorities for Europeans. Another highlight from the Eurobarometer is the perception of the parliament itself. 40% of citizens say they have a positive image of the hemicycle, which is the only EU institution directly elected. Meanwhile, 40% say their view is neutral and only 18% say it's negative. This marks the first time that the positive perception outweighs the neutral perception. The Eurobarometer will be the last to be released before the elections, scheduled to be held between June 6 and 9.
Moscow concert hall attack suspect Alisher Kasimov was denied an appeal against his arrest by the Moscow City Court. Kasimov was detained on suspicion of taking part in the attack at a concert hall on the outskirts of Moscow on March 22nd. He allegedly leased an apartment to the 4 assailants who carried out the attack. The attack killed at least 145 people and wounded 551. The Islamic State militant group has claimed responsibility for the attack.
Euronews. The news.